Have you ever wondered why some people seem impossible to manipulate, disrespect, or take advantage of? No matter what happens, they remain calm. They don't argue endlessly. They don't seek revenge. They don't try to control others. Yet somehow people quickly learn where the line is and rarely cross it twice. This is especially true for Sigma men. One of the biggest misconceptions about Sigma personalities is that they tolerate everything because they are quiet. People often mistake silence for weakness and for passivity. But that couldn't be further from the truth. A Sigma may be patient, understanding, and willing to give people chances. They may overlook small mistakes and avoid unnecessary conflict. However, there are certain things they simply will not tolerate, not because they are arrogant, not because they think they are better than anyone else, but because they understand the value of self-respect. Sigma men know that what you tolerate eventually becomes your reality. If you constantly accept disrespect, people will continue disrespecting you. If you allow manipulation, it will only grow stronger. If you repeatedly ignore unhealthy behavior, it often becomes a permanent part of your life. That's why Sigma men are extremely selective about what they allow into their world. They don't waste energy trying to change everyone. They don't force people to behave differently. Instead, they quietly set standards and let people's actions determine whether they deserve a place in their lives. This approach often surprises others. Many expect loud reactions, emotional arguments, or dramatic confrontations. Instead, the Sigma simply steps back, withdraws their energy, and moves on. And once that happens, there's usually no second warning. In today's video, we're going to explore Astra's 10 things Sigma men never tolerate. These are the behaviors, attitudes, and patterns that immediately destroy respect and push a Sigma away. Stay until the end because the final point is something that almost guarantees a Sigma will walk away, no matter who you are. Asterisk 1. Disrespect. Disrespect is one thing Sigma men never tolerate for long. They may be patient, calm, and understanding, but they also have a strong sense of self-respect. They understand that the way people treat you often reflects what you allow. A Sigma doesn't expect special treatment. They don't demand attention or constant praise. What they do expect is basic respect. When someone repeatedly talks down to them, ignores their boundaries, or treats them unfairly, they take notice. What's interesting is that a Sigma rarely reacts immediately. Many people mistake this silence for weakness. In reality, they are observing. They are paying attention to patterns. They want to know whether the disrespect was a mistake or a habit. If it happens once, they may let it go. If it continues, everything changes. Instead of creating drama, the Sigma often becomes distant. Their effort decreases. Their trust fades. Their interest in maintaining the connection starts disappearing. The reason is simple. A Sigma believes that respect is the foundation of every healthy relationship. Without respect, trust becomes difficult. Communication becomes difficult. Loyalty becomes difficult. That's why repeated disrespect is one of the fastest ways to lose a Sigma's attention. They would rather walk away from a disrespectful environment than stay somewhere they are constantly undervalued. For a Sigma, self-respect always comes before approval. 2. Manipulation. Sigma men value freedom more than almost anything else. That's why manipulation is something they refuse to tolerate. Manipulation often hides behind guilt, pressure, emotional games, half-truths, or attempts to control someone's decisions. Many people don't notice these tactics until it's too late. A Sigma tends to notice them much earlier. One reason is that Sigma individuals spend a lot of time observing behavior. They pay attention to patterns. They notice when someone's words don't match their actions. They notice when kindness comes with hidden conditions. At first, they may give someone the benefit of the doubt. They understand that nobody is perfect. But once manipulation becomes a pattern, their trust begins to disappear. What makes Sigma men difficult to manipulate is that they don't rely heavily on external validation. They don't constantly seek approval, which means common manipulation tactics often lose their effectiveness. When a Sigma realizes someone is trying to control them, they usually don't argue. They don't try to win a battle of emotions. Instead, they create distance. The manipulator often expects resistance, but what they receive is silence and withdrawal. The Sigma simply removes themselves from the situation. For them, relationships should be built on honesty, respect, and choice. The moment manipulation enters the picture, the relationship begins losing value. That's why manipulation is one of the quickest ways to lose a Sigma's trust and respect. Asterisk 3. Constant dishonesty trust is extremely important to Sigma men. And honesty plays a major role in building that trust. Everyone makes mistakes. Everyone occasionally says things they regret. A Sigma understands this. What they do not tolerate is constant dishonesty. Repeated lying creates uncertainty. Once someone develops a habit of being dishonest, every future conversation becomes questionable. The Sigma starts wondering which statements are true and which are not. This creates a problem because trust is difficult to rebuild once it has been broken repeatedly. Many people think small lies don't matter. A Sigma sees things differently. Small lies often reveal larger character issues. If someone lies about minor things, how can they be trusted with important matters? What's interesting is that Sigma men rarely become obsessed with catching people in lies. They don't play detective, they simply observe. Over time, patterns reveal themselves. When enough evidence accumulates, the Sigma quietly adjusts their level of trust. Information is shared less frequently. Emotional investment decreases. The relationship becomes more distant. The reason is simple. A Sigma wants relationships that feel stable and genuine. Constant dishonesty destroys that foundation. Without trust, every interaction becomes more complicated than it needs to be. That's why honesty carries so much value in the Sigma mindset. Once someone develops a reputation for repeated dishonesty, regaining a Sigma's confidence becomes extremely difficult. Asterisk 4. Fake loyalty. One thing Sigma men never tolerate is fake loyalty. Loyalty is not measured by words, it is measured by actions, especially during difficult times. Many people claim to be loyal when everything is going well. They stay close when there is something to gain. They offer support when it's convenient. They act like true friends when life is easy. But challenges reveal the truth. A Sigma pays close attention to who remains consistent when circumstances become difficult. They notice who disappears when support is needed. They notice who changes their behavior when situations stop benefiting them. This doesn't mean a Sigma expects people to solve all their problems. What they value is consistency. They respect people whose actions match their promises. Fake loyalty is particularly damaging because it creates false trust. It gives the impressions that someone can be relied upon when they actually cannot. Once a Sigma discovers this, their perspective changes quickly. They stop expecting support from that person. They stop sharing important parts of their life. They stop investing the same level of trust and energy. The reason is simple. Loyalty is one of the foundations of meaningful relationships. Without it, connections become shallow and unreliable. A Sigma would rather have a small circle of genuine people than a large group of individuals whose loyalty disappears when circumstances change. That's why fake loyalty is something they never tolerate for long. Once it's exposed, the relationship is rarely the same again. Asterisk 5. Excessive drama. Sigma men value peace, clarity, and emotional stability. Because of this, they have very little tolerance for excessive drama. Every person experiences conflict from time to time. That's normal. What a Sigma avoids is unnecessary conflict that seems to follow certain people wherever they go. Some individuals constantly create problems. They turn small issues into major crises. They spread negativity, fuel arguments, and thrive on emotional chaos. A Sigma quickly recognizes these patterns. At first, they may try to remain patient. They may listen, offer advice, or attempt to understand the situation. But when drama becomes a constant part of someone's behavior, the Sigma begins distancing themselves. The reason is simple. Drama consumes energy without producing solutions, while others become trapped in endless cycles of arguments and emotional reactions. A Sigma prefers to focus on productive goals and meaningful experiences. Peace becomes increasingly valuable as they grow older and wiser. Many people mistakenly assume that avoiding drama means avoiding responsibility. A Sigma sees it differently. They understand that not every conflict deserves attention. Sometimes the smartest decision is simply refusing to participate. This mindset protects their focus and mental well-being. It allows them to invest energy where it creates value rather than where it creates chaos. That's why excessive drama is one of the fastest ways to push a Sigma away. They would rather protect their peace than become involved in problems that never seem to end. Asterisk 6. Being taken for granted. A Sigma can be incredibly patient, supportive, and reliable. When they care about someone, they often invest significant time and energy into the relationship. The problem begins when that effort becomes expected rather than appreciated. Being taken for granted is something Sigma men never tolerate indefinitely. At first, they may continue giving. They may continue helping, supporting, and showing up when needed. They don't usually keep score because they genuinely care. But over time, they notice patterns. They notice when their effort is never acknowledged. They notice when their kindness is treated like an obligation. They notice when people will only reach out when they need something. These patterns slowly change how they view the relationship. A Sigma understands that healthy relationships require mutual effort. They don't expect perfection, but they do expect some level of appreciation and reciprocity. When that balance disappears, they begin pulling back. What's interesting is that many people don't realize how much a Sigma contributes until those contributions stop. The support they once relied on quietly disappears. The Sigma doesn't usually complain about being taken for granted. They don't demand gratitude. Instead, they simply reduce their investment. Their time becomes focused elsewhere. Their attention shifts toward people and activities that create genuine value. For a Sigma, effort is precious. They are willing to give it freely, but they refuse to continuously invest where it is neither respected nor appreciated. That's why being taken for granted is often the beginning of emotional distance and eventual detachment. Asterisk 7. Lack of accountability. One thing Sigma men struggle to respect is a person who never takes responsibility for their actions. Everyone makes mistakes. Everyone experiences failure at some point. What matters is how a person responds when things go wrong. A Sigma respects honesty and self-awareness. If someone makes a mistake and admits it, they are often willing to forgive and move forward. But when a person constantly blames others, makes excuses, and refuses to accept responsibility, the Sigma quickly loses respect. People who avoid accountability often create the same problems repeatedly. Instead of learning from mistakes, they search for someone else to blame. Every setback becomes someone else's fault. Every failure is explained away rather than examined. A Sigma sees this as a major weakness. Growth requires accountability. Without it, improvement becomes almost impossible. If a person never admits their role in a problem, they also lose the opportunity to learn from it. Over time, this behavior becomes exhausting. Conversations become repetitive because the same excuses appear again and again. Solutions become difficult because responsibility is constantly being avoided. Rather than arguing endlessly, a Sigma often distances themselves. They understand that they cannot force someone to be honest with themselves. For a Sigma, accountability is a sign of maturity. It shows strength, self-respect, and a willingness to grow. The absence of accountability often reveals the opposite, which is why they refuse to tolerate it for long. Asterisk 8. Boundary violations. Sigma men take boundaries seriously. They understand that healthy boundaries are essential for maintaining respect, trust, and emotional well-being. A boundary is simply a limit that defines what behavior is acceptable and what behavior is not. Everyone has them, whether they realize it or not. A Sigma tends to communicate boundaries through actions rather than long explanations. They may be patient, flexible, and understanding, but they still have limits. The problem arises when someone repeatedly ignores those limits. Maybe it's a person who constantly invades their privacy. Maybe it's someone who refuses to respect their time. Maybe it's a person who repeatedly crosses lines after being given multiple chances. A Sigma notices these patterns quickly. What many people don't understand is that repeated boundary violations feel like repeated disrespect. They send the message that the other person's needs matter more than the Sigma's. At first, the Sigma may try to be patient. They may assume the person simply doesn't realize what they're doing. But when the behavior continues, patience begins to disappear. Instead of arguing, they often become distant. Access becomes limited. Communication decreases. Trust weakens. This isn't about punishment, it's about protection. A Sigma understands that boundaries exist for a reason. They protect peace, focus, and self-respect. When someone repeatedly ignores those boundaries, they are often choosing their own convenience over mutual respect. That's why boundary violations are something Sigma men refuse to tolerate indefinitely. Asterisk 9. Jealousy and control. Freedom is extremely important to Sigma men. They value independence, personal choice, and the ability to make their own decisions. Because of this, they have very little tolerance for jealousy and controlling behavior. Healthy relationships are built on trust. Unhealthy relationships are often built on control. A Sigma quickly notices when someone constantly tries to dictate their actions, monitor their decisions, or limit their freedom. At first, these behaviors may appear subtle. They may be disguised as concern, protection, or affection. But over time, the real intention becomes clear. Control is often rooted in insecurity. Instead of building trust, the controlling person attempts to manage every situation. They want constant reassurance. They want influence over decisions that should remain personal. A Sigma finds this exhausting. They believe that genuine respect includes allowing people the freedom to be themselves. Trust should not require constant surveillance or control. When jealousy becomes excessive, it creates tension. When control becomes a habit, it creates resentment. Rather than fighting for independence within a restrictive environment, a Sigma often chooses distance. They would rather walk away than spend years defending their right to think, act, and live freely. That's why controlling behavior is one of the biggest red flags in the Sigma mindset. It threatens the very independence they value most. Asterisk 10. Repeated betrayal. Of all the things Sigma men refuse to tolerate, repeated betrayal may be the most serious. Trust is not given easily by a Sigma. They tend to be careful about who they allow into their inner circle. They observe people closely and take time before developing deep trust. Because trust is earned slowly, betrayal carries significant consequences. A Sigma understands that people make mistakes. Depending on the situation, they may even be willing to forgive a betrayal once. But repeated betrayal is different. When someone breaks trust multiple times, it becomes a pattern rather than an accident. At that point, the Sigma stops viewing the issue as a mistake. They begin viewing it as a reflection of character. This changes everything. The trust that took years to build can disappear surprisingly quickly. The emotional investment begins fading. The desire to maintain the relationship weakens. What makes this sign powerful is that a Sigma rarely announces the decision. They don't create dramatic scenes. They don't seek revenge. Instead, they quietly accept what the repeated betrayal has revealed. It's once they understand that someone cannot be trusted, they adjust accordingly. Access becomes limited. Vulnerability disappears. The relationship becomes more distant or ends entirely. For a Sigma, trust is one of the most valuable things a person can possess. That's why repeated betrayal is often the one thing that permanently changes how they see someone. Sigma men are patient, independent, and often willing to give people opportunities to learn from mistakes. But there are certain behaviors they refuse to tolerate because those behaviors destroy trust, respect, and peace of mind. Asterisk, now I want to hear from you. Which of these 10 things do you think is the fastest way to lose a Sigma's respect? Leave your answer in the comments below. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to subscribe, turn on notifications, and join the community for more Sigma mindset and self-improvement content. Remember, the strongest boundaries are often the ones that don't need to be announced, they simply get enforced.